Hello there, Lunar Squadron, and welcome back to the channel. Now that the month of February has come to a close, and so too has the IGN First coverage of Jedi Survivor, we wanted to go back and talk about an exciting hidden detail we found within the new gameplay that we got for Jedi Survivor throughout the month that links back to actually the gameplay trailer in December. We think this has some exciting ramifications for the story of Jedi Survivor, and we want to go over all of it with you here today. But first, if you're new to the channel, we would love to have you as always, and the way to do that is just go down below this video, hit that little subscribe button, the bell notification right on next to it. It will notify you every single time Andreas and I upload. Now, without further ado, Andreas, let's talk about some exciting hidden details for Jedi Survivor.
Yeah, let's do it. For those of you who have seen the IGN Fan Fest gameplay, particularly, you'll recall that they showed off gameplay for the new Jedi Chambers in Star Wars Jedi Survivor. We saw Cal going through a Jedi Chamber, and we got some new information on how Jedi Chambers are going to work in Jedi Survivor, but we're going to zero in on just a few key details that we learned from that gameplay that we received earlier this month. First off, guys, you'll remember that when Cal is entering the Jedi Chamber, he has that ancient device that we've seen in the past, and he uses it to unlock this door, and we have reason to believe that these doors, or doors that are identical to this, are going to be located throughout this game. We're going to get into that in just a moment, but first, it's important to note that he is using this ancient device to open this door. And then we got some more information from the interview that was going on behind the scenes. We learned that there are going to be many different chambers throughout the game, and that many of these are going to be optional, that they are going to be available to us to unlock certain abilities and perks. In this case, we did see that they unlocked a perk in this trailer. However, they did say that there will be other unlockables by way of these Jedi Chambers. And what we also learned is that while a lot of these are going to be optional to do for optional upgrades to Cal, there's going to be one that is mandatory that you have to complete. Now, one detail that we picked up on this is we kind of think that we've maybe solved which one is going to be the mandatory chamber that is part of the main story of this game. Nick, care to elaborate?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. You know, a lot of you might be wondering, why are we going back to this Jedi Chamber gameplay footage that we got a few weeks ago? And that is because recently we were going back through all of the footage that we had gotten for Jedi Survivor over the last few months, and we went back and we took a look at the gameplay trailer that we got at the Game Awards back in December. And as we were watching this trailer, we noticed something that goes by very quickly in the background. And at the time when that trailer had dropped, we had no idea that that was something important. We had no context as to what that possibly was. But what I'm talking about is, if you go to the sequence in Rambler's Ranch, when Cal faces off against the Bedlam Raider and Rayvis, you will see in that opening sequence of that shot, behind that Bedlam Raider is one of those Jedi Chambers. The door behind that Bedlam Raider is the exact same door that you see Cal opening in the Jedi Chamber gameplay. Now, I know a handful of people have pointed this out, we've noticed this, but not a lot of people are talking about this, and I think it's important to sit down and really talk about this because, like I said, when this trailer dropped in December, there was no context as to what that behind the Bedlam Raider was. And now we do have that context because of this new gameplay footage from Jedi Survivor, that is one of those Jedi Chambers. And like Andreas, like you said, in that gameplay footage, the game dev for Respawn said that while most of these are going to be optional, at least one of these Jedi Chambers is going to be mandatory. It's going to be a necessary part of the story. And that has left us wondering, is if this Jedi Chamber in this sequence in Rambler's Ranch is that mandatory one that we are talking about, or that we are going to have to go through, because we have also wondered in the past now, would the High Republic individual from this game, would he be located within one of these Jedi chambers? Because we know now that these Jedi chambers are ancient. They're from that High Republic era, and we know that this guy is locked somewhere in one of these High Republic facilities. We know that Cal uses that same device to locate him and to open the door to find him. We saw that in the first trailer that we got for Jedi Survivor. So we just know that there's a lot of connections between all of these devices and these doors and these story points. So I guess the conversation to have here, the interesting conversation to have here is, do we think this Jedi chamber that we see now for sure behind that Bedlam Raider is A, the mandatory one, B, is it the one that the High Republic individual is in, and C, do we even think that the High Republic guy is going to be in one of these Jedi chambers? There's just a lot of interesting questions now that have been raised ever since we've been able to kind of tie all of these dots together and kind of go point to point to point. So I turn it to you, Andreas. What do you think? Do you think that this Jedi chamber is one of the mandatory ones, or is the mandatory one? Do you think the High Republic guy will be located in one of these Jedi chambers? And if he is, since we know that at some point Rayvis and the High Republic guy are going to be teaming up and they will have their hands on that device, do we think that they are guarding this Jedi chamber and perhaps this is the one that he's in? If he is in one of these, like, what do we think is going on here? What do we think is the importance of this Jedi chamber that we know for sure now there is one located within Ramblers Ranch?
So my impression of this cutscene here, where we see Cal with Rayvis and the Bedlam Raider, is that I think that Rayvis and the Bedlam Raider are actually waiting by the Jedi chamber because they are trying to take the ancient device from Cal. So that's kind of my theory. I think that they are laying in wait by the Jedi chamber, and that when Cal comes to open it and find whatever's inside, that they do jump him and eventually take that ancient device. Because we do see later on in the reveal trailer that Rayvis does take that ancient device. It looks like he's giving it to our High Republic friend. And honestly, Nick, I think that the mandatory Jedi chamber is the Jedi chamber that will have the High Republic guy in it. I think we do see from the reveal trailer that Cal uses the ancient device to open the bacta tank, and I think that leads me to believe that that is a Jedi chamber, that he will have to use the ancient device to access the Jedi chamber. So my theory is, and again, this is all just speculation based on what we have, my theory is that early on in the game, he uses the ancient device to find our High Republic friend, and then later on in the game, once the High Republic guy is released into the wild and has associated with the Bedlam Raider camp, that Cal will eventually run into this situation that we see with the Jedi chamber door in the background, and that Cal will lose the ancient device to the High Republic guy. That's just kind of my theory, Nick. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so I agree with you on some things and I disagree with you on other points. So the way I kind of see it, just based off of some of the context that we have about the story, is we know that this sequence on Kobo is going to happen relatively early into the game, and we know from some of the interviews that Cal is going to make his way down to Rambler's Ranch, and then he's going to make his way into the cantina, which we know, we've seen it in that shot, and then that's where a big story point happens. And I've always just assumed up to this point that big story point that they're talking about is this first initial showdown with Rayvis and with the Bedlam Raiders, kind of where Cal gets really introduced into this group, into Rayvis, and kind of starts that whole storyline. What I think is going on here is I do actually think that Jedi chamber behind the Bedlam Raider is going to be the mandatory one, and not because that's where the High Republic guy is going to be. I think just because this sequence is going to happen so early in the game, I think that after you kind of finish the sequence and whatever happens, you get away from the battle or they take off, I think the game will then take you into this Jedi chamber as like a sort of tutorial into the Jedi chambers. I don't think it's going to be a very interesting sequence of this game, but I do think it's going to be a mandatory sequence because I think this is where they're going to tutorial and introduce you to the concept of Jedi chambers within the game. So in my mind, I do think this Jedi chamber behind the Bedlam Raider does have a high chance at being the mandatory one. I just don't think it's going to be the mandatory one because the High Republic guy is going to be in it. And yes, I do know that device has been used or will be used by Cal to open up the passageway or the door to get to that High Republic guy. but I'm still not entirely convinced personally that the High Republic guy will actually even be in one of these Jedi chambers. I know it's an idea that we've discussed in the past, and I really like bringing it up because I like getting the opinions of everyone in the comments about this, just because we like presenting these details and bringing these hidden details to light, just because we like sparking these conversations with everybody. Not to present like a, hey, we're right and you're wrong, just to spark conversation. So just want to throw that in there before we get yelled at in the comments. But in my mind, I'm just not convinced that this guy is going to be in a Jedi chamber, just because if you look at the overall topography and environment that we find this guy in, it just isn't an exact match to what we know the environment of these Jedi chambers will look like. But that's not to say that all of these Jedi chambers are going to look exactly the same. They could look different. So it is possible that this guy is in one of these Jedi chambers, but from what we know that the Jedi Chamber will look like, I'm just not convinced that this is the same location. And that just raises another interesting question for me, because if it's not, then this device is even more versatile than we thought it was going into. And I'm just really interested to learn what exactly the importance of this device is, because we know it will be used to at least either locate and unlock Jedi chambers. We know that it will be used by Cal to grant access to the High Republic guy at some point. And we know that the High Republic guy really, really wants to get his hands on this device, and that it will help him stop Cal. So I really, really am interested to know what the importance of this device is really going to be, because it seems like it is going to be the massive MacGuffin of this entire game. It's going to play such a huge role in this game, and I'm just incredibly excited to learn what it is. But to kind of wrap it all up, yes, I do believe that this Jedi Chamber, now that we know, is going to be in Rambler's Ranch, now that we have that context from that gameplay footage that we just got. I do think it's going to be the mandatory one that they're talking about, and I think it's not for the exciting reason that I think you perhaps believe. I'm taking the more boring approach, and I think it's just going to be a way for them to introduce you to Jedi chambers, as a way to tutorial them, because I just believe this sequence is going to happen so early in the game. So I'm going to take the boring approach, but you're more than welcome to have the exciting approach. I hope you're right, but I just the way we know how these games work, I just think it's going to be the more boring approach.
Yeah, that's definitely a great point, Nick, just from like a practicality standpoint, that this game is going to have to show you how to access the Jedi chambers. That said, Cal is also either going to be walking into this game having already been in possession of the ancient device, or you are going to happen upon it. I'm not really sure which way that's going to go, but I do know that the game is going to have to hold your hand at the beginning and put you through some sort of tutorial, and it would be a little awkward if in the middle of a tutorial sequence you're going to happen upon this High Republic guy. It seems like a pretty big point in the story. It's been the focal point in the lead up to the release of the game. So I do think that it would be a little odd, but there's just something that is telling me that the mandatory sequence is this guy, that he is in one of these chambers. And you know what? I also, Nick, after hearing your point that the Jedi chamber doesn't look anything like this room that we find the High Republic dude in. Also, I wish that we had a name for the High Republic guy so we can stop calling him the High Republic guy. It's kind of a long phrase to call him. But I do think that there is some visual overlap. There's some like overgrowth looking like weed like thing coming out of the ground that you can see in both the back to tank room as well as in certain shots from the Jedi chambers that we received from FanFest. So, and I'm not so convinced that all of these chambers would look identical. I am wondering if there's going to be a variance among them. So just something that I'm curious about as we progress along towards the release of the game. I'm really hoping that we get some more gameplay to flesh this out, but also part of me is hoping that we can wait and find out all of this on our own as we are playing through the game. But with that, guys, I think that opens up the floor to everyone in the comments. What do you all think? Do you think that the door in the background of this trailer is going to be the mandatory Jedi Chamber? Do you think this is the chamber where we are going to find our High Republic friend? And frankly, do you think that the High Republic guy is going to be in a chamber at all? Or do you think he's just going to be somewhere else and that we use the ancient device to ultimately unlock the Bacta tank? Let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on all of this. However, guys, that's going to do it for this discussion. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, we will see you all in the next video.